Are you a mother, father, or you are involved in caring for children? If yes, then listen to Ask the Pediatricians every Thursday by 10 a.m. for insightful discussion on popular child health topics such as dangerous child health practices, immunization, infant feeding, developmental milestones, and so much more. You also get to ask questions on these topics and listen to answers to real-life child health issues by a pediatrician. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation is devoted to health education and information of parents and caregivers of children in the community to support you in raising healthy children. Don't miss Ask the Pediatricians with Dr. Gbemi because it's informative, educative, and interactive. Ask the Pediatricians Hour, the program for caring parents.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask the Pediatrician Hour. I am Dr. Gbemi Salaboide. I'm a pediatrician and I'm your anchor for today's program. Ask the Pediatrician Hour is brought to you courtesy of Ask the Pediatricians Foundation. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation is a registered nonprofit in Nigeria, and we're fully committed to the health and welfare of all children globally, but especially in sub-Saharan Africa and Nigeria. And we do that through our health education program, health information. We also provide like a first aid kind of response to parents on health issues regarding their children. And of course, we also do health education programs like the one you are listening to right now. So I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. On whichever platform you're watching from, whether you're listening to me on Fresh Race Radio or on the Ask Dr. Gbemi ATP podcast, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're also watching Facebook, either our Facebook page or Facebook group, or even Fresh Race Radio Facebook page, you are warmly welcome. Or if you're watching on our YouTube channel, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. And as usual, I'm going to be talking about something very important. Today, I'm not going to talk about something very technical topic. I'm actually going to talk about something really very simple, but something that tends to make a lot of parents to worry a lot. And so today I'm talking about the crying baby. Okay, every week I get a lot of questions about mothers, especially who are worried, even fathers as well, about a baby who just keep crying and crying, and parents are overwhelmed, they're stressed, they don't know what to do. And so I just said, okay, I think it's something we should talk about. It's not every time we have to talk about malaria or pneumonia, or all those big meningitis and all those very big medical illnesses. But today we're going to talk about something more practical, something more relatable when it comes to our children, and especially for the babies. So we're going to talk about the crying baby. Why do baby cry? Why do they seem like some babies cry so much? And how do you know when to do something? Because as a pediatrician, it's not unusual for us to have a mother come to us, especially new moms or first-time mothers who have come to us purely because this baby has been crying and everybody is stressed and they don't know what to do. So we're going to talk about the crying baby. But before we go into the topic, I just want to remind you that if you have any questions from today's podcast, broadcast, or any of the previous teachings, you can always post your questions directly to Ask the Pediatricians Facebook group. You cannot miss our Facebook group on Facebook. Our pediatricians, our doctors, our moderators, we are there 24/7, Mondays to Saturdays, to provide answers to those questions that you may have about your children's health. So feel free to drop us a line. and ask your questions. We aim to answer your question within 72 hours. Most of the time we do it within 24 hours, but feel free to always drop your questions and we will try and answer them for you. We won't be able to take your questions on Sundays, so but Mondays to Saturdays the group is open and we can answer your questions. All right, so let's dive into the topic, the crying baby. I mean, it doesn't need any definition. Everybody knows what it means for a baby to cry, and it's always sometimes something that could be of serious concerns to parents. And let me just start by saying that all babies cry. Okay, all babies cry. And sometimes I get questions as if parents are worried that why is my baby crying? Or they frame that question in a way to suggest I mean, this baby should not be crying at all. Like, why should my baby be crying? And they are surprised that the baby cry. And I'm always like telling parents, it's okay for babies to cry. Okay, it's okay for babies to cry. And I think the question comes from the mindset parents do have that when babies cry, it means they are hungry, or it means they are in pain, or it means something is not okay with them. I think that's the first thing I want to address today. And I think that will suddenly set a lot of parents free. Okay, now for babies, in the first 1 year of life, mostly, they don't speak. We call them preverbal. So they don't have any way of communicating what they feel or what is going on with them to us as parents and as carers of children. So the main mode of communication that babies have in that first year of life majorly is crying. All right. So babies cry as their way of getting your attention, and that is their primary mode of communication. I think we need to understand that first, so that all crying is maybe trying to communicate with us. However, this communication is not limited to only discomforts, okay? Because a lot of us think crying means discomfort, crying means baby is not happy, crying means something is not right. That is not always true, okay? So baby's primary mode of communication is crying, okay? And so they use cry to get your attention for everything. And most of us think, actually from people from Nigeria, most mothers think, oh, my baby cries me hunger. Yes, a baby can cry when they are hungry, but every cry is not an hunger cry. Because I get questions like, oh, my baby is crying, my baby is not satisfied with breast milk. And I always ask, how do you know your baby is not satisfied with breast milk? Oh, because even after the baby has sucked for 1 hour, the baby is still crying. And so a lot of mothers who could have done exclusive breastfeeding get frustrated for that, because people will not think them, actually the grandmothers, apologies to the grandmothers, I don't mean to always come for you, but because most time you are always the one with these new moms, first time moms, and you always give them the advice, and I always want us to get things correctly. I know you're doing it from the place of love, what you have known or what you have experienced, but sometimes it may actually be wrong. So people think, oh, I've breastfed my baby for 1 hour, and that means baby is not the breast milk is not enough. Maybe you should just go for formula. And I'm always like, sometimes, I love those who are very honest enough to tell us that even after they go ahead and give the formula, the cry still continues. So, which means every cry is not an hunger cry. So the fact that you breastfed your babies and the baby is still crying does not necessarily mean they are not full, or it does not mean they are still hungry. So the first thing I want all of our mothers is really, those of us from Africa, Nigeria, is to understand that every cry is not an hunger cry. Hunger is one of the reasons babies cry, but it's not the only reason. So some of us will feed these babies to the point that they are actually almost vomiting the milk back, and we still think that they're crying is hunger. I mean, that does not make sense. And I always tell you can actually express your breast milk. You can see the quantity of, because sometimes when babies suck directly, you are not sure how much is getting into their mouth, into their tummy. But if you express and you give it to them, you can actually measure it, and then you can say, oh, I've given 100 mils, I've given 200 mils of breast milk. There is no way this baby should still be hungry after taking this large volume of breast milk. So that's definitely reassure you that this cry is not a hunger cry. So babies cry for hunger, but that's not the only thing. Actually, baby cry for virtually everything. All right, baby can cry for the wet nappies. I'm sure most of us know that. So babies can also cry if they are, the environment is too cold or it's too wet. That these are the common reasons why babies could cry. All right, but do you also know that babies cry just because they want you? They just want that security, that comfort of their mothers being around them. They just want you to hold them. There's nothing wrong. They just want to be aware that you are still there for them. So that could also be another reason why babies cry. And sometimes babies cry because they just want to sleep. They are bored, they're tired, they just want to sleep. All right, sometimes when they are waking up as well, they cry. Sometimes baby also cry in their sleep. So I got a funny question, and I know when mothers ask me some questions, I always know what they are also implying, even when they are not asking it directly. So a mom was asking, my baby is always crying at 12 midnight. For some of us who have a lot of superstitious belief, some people believe that maybe that's the time some demonic powers are working, and maybe they are oppressing the baby. That's why baby is always crying at 12 midnight. There's nothing wrong. So I always tell mothers, sometimes babies have cried during the day, and when they sleep, there's a part of the sleep we call the rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep. They actually relieve their dreams or what has happened during the day. So if baby has cried during the day, baby could also cry at that time. It does not mean anything is wrong. They're just dreaming, and they can cry in their sleep. And and the mom said, oh, if I can't carry her, the baby will be fine. So it is not like there's anything oppressing the baby or anything like that. These are 6 common reasons why baby cry. Baby can also cry when they're happy as well. I know that's very difficult to believe, but sometimes they also cry because they're happy, they're overstimulated, excited, So I want us to establish the fact that crying is one of the main communication or the primary means of communication that babies have in that first year of life. So they can cry for virtually everything. And our role as mothers is to now figure out when is it to cry for food, when is it to cry for hunger, when is it to cry for wet nappies, when is it to cry for I want to sleep, when is it to cry for I just want you to hold me, when is it to cry for I just want some comfort. So that is our job as mothers. It's not always easy. Sometimes it's just triage, you do this and you try that and you check this, you check that, and then you figure out why the baby is crying. Okay, so most of us sometimes we know this part, but then there are also some signs that babies keep crying and they keep crying. So you've triaged all the common things. You fed them. They are not wet. They are not cold. They are not hot. The nappies has been changed. Everything is fine. You've cuddled them, and the baby keeps crying and crying and crying, and it appears this crying is not going to stop. So sometimes, which brings me down to the next point, like crying can also be a sign or a symptom of the baby who is ill. So sometimes the baby could be sick, and that is why they are crying. And this is very, very important for us to recognize. Like some cry could actually be serious as well. It is not every cry that is the first set of baby just trying to communicate things to us. But sometimes baby could also cry actually from pain. They could also cry from illnesses. And what we need to do as parents is to know, is this cry more than just the usual cry? And usually the way you know is that actually crying from pain, from other medical conditions or illnesses, tends to be the one of those ones that can go on for a long time. So most of the other triage cries, if it's ongoing to feed them, that's the end of it. If they want to sleep, want to cuddle them, they sleep, and that's the end of that. But if babies keep crying and crying and crying, sometimes for hours, that is when parents tend to worry, and that is the one that we really need to address. So how do I know that my baby is crying from being unwell or from having a condition? So there are medical conditions that will make babies to cry a lot. I will start from the simple ones to the more sinister ones. Okay, so the commonest reasons, especially for the newborns and in the first few months of life, is colic. Okay, we have had the word colic. Colic is a very common word. In fact, colic, for those from Yoruba culture, they call it Inuiwo. Some call it wind pain, and there are lots of local names that people call it. So, but that's one of the commonest reasons why some baby cries for what look like there's no reason for the cry. In other words, the first set of reasons why baby cry that I mentioned earlier, the hunger, the dirty nappy, the weather, hot, cold, and all that, you've run through all those ones, and all of them have been sorted. And yet this baby keeps crying. This baby is not hungry. We've checked, there's no pain, baby has not fallen or anything, nothing has happened, and the baby keeps crying. Sometimes when they cry, they appear they're stretching their body, sometimes they pass gas and all that. And usually in that age group of between like 6 weeks and 3 months, one of the first things we'll consider in such a baby is colic. All right. And when it comes to colic, there are lots of explanation on why do baby have colic and all that. The honest short answer is that we don't really know the cause of colic in babies. Of course, we have some theories of what we're suspecting is going on. Sometimes people think, oh, it is the it's like something, the gas is too much in the tummy. A lot of mothers always call it like they're having tummy pain or stomach pain, but really they are not actually having any tummy pain. All right, but usually, how do you know colic cry? Number one, baby start to cry suddenly. I mean, it's not as if anything happened. Baby just start to cry, and you do everything, and it doesn't seem to help. And this is why it's especially very frustrating for first-time moms or new moms especially, and they tend to do the same cry the same time of the day. That's the difference with colic. So, baby has been well, everything has been fine. Suddenly, the crying starts. Sometimes it happens at night, sometimes it could happen any time of the day, but it tends to be at the same time, and then the baby cries and cries and cries and cries. And sometimes some of them stretch their leg or draw their legs up, and sometimes it can last for minutes, sometimes it can last for hours. Sometimes baby will colic and cry for 3 hours straight on, and then after a while, baby eventually pipes down, and that's it. And colic can go on, but the good thing about colic is that it tends to stop by the time the baby is around 3 months old. So it's one of those just watch and wait kind of situation. There are lots of things people have tried for colic. Some people have used things like Simeticon, which is Infacol, and people will claim it works so well, but it doesn't work for some people. Some babies, driving them, some mothers put their children in the car and drive them around, and that will work for them. Some maybe it's white noises, maybe they put on the fan or the washing machine. Just some these days, technology will now have recording of all those white noises. Some babies just listen to that noise and they're fine. Some babies it's just musha. Most of us, actually in African culture, most of the grandparents God bless them. They tend to help us with that. Put the baby on the back or carry the baby on their hands and just movements, dancing or rocking them back and forth. And sometimes that helps. Sometimes not really helps with a colicky baby. And most of us know when baby is colicky and you try all these things. If it works for you, good. If it doesn't work, just hang in there. One thing we know with colic is that it will eventually go on its own. Usually by the time most babies about 3 to 4 months, colic is gone. And that is it. So we just tell mothers just hang in there to come to pass, and it usually does. So colic is one of the reasons why babies will cry for so long, and actually for babies, newborn babies, in the first 1 month, 2 months of life, crying, and there's absolutely no reason. Babies are otherwise fine, eating well, sucking, everything's fine. But when it's time for that cry, they cry, and you do everything, nothing, then eventually they stop. You can be sure that is colic, and you don't need to panic. There are some things that helps colic to be better. It's better with babies that are breastfed, babies that are formula fed. They tend to, take in a lot more gas or hair into their tummy. Though there are these days they call it anti-colic bottles and all that, but it's worse with formula feeding compared to breastfeeding as well. So also just making sure you bob the baby so you can help them expel some of the gas, because it seemed like part of what make colic is the gas that the baby has to get rid of, and sometimes they just can't deal with that. Sometimes some parents have observed that if they eat some particular food, it tends to make the baby more colicky. So there's no particular list per se. I will just tell parents, if you eat anything and your baby is more gassy, more colicky, then just stop it for that period. Some other times, if I don't take milk or dairy products, it's helpful. Some it is other food, beans and all that. But whatever it is you have observed, just avoid it. It's really things that are spicy, all those flavors that are strong. Sometimes could make some babies more colicky than the other, so you just want to avoid that. So that's one thing that could make a baby to be very, very colicky. To cry a lot. Colic is number one. Now let's go on. What are the other things that could make babies to cry a lot? Sometimes it's constipation. Constipation for the older children, sometimes they can verbalize to us and tell us their tummy, hurts and all that. So, and you notice that they struggle to pass stools, and then the stools are hard, and we've talked about constipation before. So some babies could also express constipation by the excessive crying. So they cry and cry, but the difference between them and colic is that colic babies will see past the normal stools and everything, but constipation, the stools will be hard and infrequent. You can see the baby struggling to pass out the stool. And when they pass, it comes out as, I've shown us the type of stools, type 1, like, droplets, pellets, and very dry and very difficult to pass. And usually this is common in formula-fed babies and babies who don't take, actually, when they start complementary feeding, if you're not giving them water, we're not giving them fruits and veggies, they are prone to constipation. So the solution to constipation, if the child is constipated already, we need to take them to get stool softener, because you have to let out the hard one first, but you also have to work on preventing it again by making sure your children, after the age of 6 months, or they start complementary feeding, you need to give them water as well. You must keep breastfeeding even after 6 months, but give them water, and also give fruits, give veggies. Let everything not just be cereals and Cerelac and all the usual stuff. It has to include other products, actually the fruits and the veggies, and let's make sure that they drink a lot of water as well. Okay, and now let's go to the sinister kind of crying. So almost every other illnesses could also make a child to cry. Okay. Now, if a child is crying so much, actually beyond that colic age, and you can't console them, sometimes we worry about what we call irritation in the brain. So children who are going to have meningitis or other infection in the brain, sometimes they also tend to have this irritable cry. So it's not just that they are crying, but they are very irritable. They are not interested in sucking. They are not interested in everything you do, and you try to comfort them, and they are not. So I'm going to give you signs that you see in a child who is really crying with all these signs. That is an emergency. Those children have to go to the hospital. So if your child is looking, they're crying, but they're also looking different. They're looking tall, as if something is happening, or they're either too hot or too cold to touch. So these children are not just going to be crying alone, but this is a child who is now crying and is sick. So that's the difference between the colic. The colic baby is well, is sucking, is doing everything, but she's just crying, but no fever, no cold, nothing. The child is well, but just cry and stop. But for a child who is now crying and now also having all the signs of illnesses, all the symptoms, that is how you know the one that is due to an illness, and that you have to take them to the hospital. So if a child is too cold, they're crying and they're very cold, or they're crying, they're very hot, or they are crying, their color is changing, or if they are, you can see their lips becoming bluish or dark colored, as parents, we're always intuitive to know that this child is just not looking like their normal self, and that child is crying, that child may be sick. So that child is an emergency. That child has to go to the hospital. Secondly, if a child is crying so much and then they begin to check, they're having what look like convulsions, or they become stiff, they go through phases where it's as if they are not there. Their eyes are rolling upward, they're very stiff, or they are stretching or checking like that, then that child is having a seizure, and that child may also have irritable cry, and that is a child who may be developing infections in the blood, infections in the brain, and you have to take that child to the hospital. Or the child is crying and also looking, like unconscious, as if they are not really there, or they are confused, or they are just flat out lethargic. That also it's not a good sign. It's a child who is very ill, and you have to take the child to the hospital. Also, if you notice any rash, a child is crying so much and they're having maybe what look like a unusual rash on a particular side of the body and all that, and if you try to press the rash, it will go away, then it will come back. It may not be easy for those of us who have black skin to say that, but you also need to take that child to the hospital. Usually for babies less than 3 months, if they are having fever with the crying. So it's not colic, they cry, but they don't have fever, they are otherwise well. But if the child is having fever with that excessive crying, so the temperature, you get your thermometer out. Remember, I say you must all have our digital thermometer. You put it in and it's reading 38, 39, and this child is crying, irritable, unconsolable, unless it is maybe after immunization, which can happen, but even then the fever won't be so high, and you already know why, because they've just had immunization. But this time around nothing has happened and they're crying so much and having fever, then you have to take these children to the hospital. Those are signs of children who are ill. So a child who is crying, who is now having other illness symptoms, that child needs to go to the hospital. It's different from a child who is crying but who is otherwise well. So that is, I think for me, is the most important way to differentiate the two group categories of crying. So crying for all the multiple reasons in the world, but the child is otherwise well, they're feeding, they're happy, not happy like because they're crying, but what I mean is that they're not showing you any other illness symptoms, they are well. Those are the ones that you can triage yourself and try to figure out. But if the child is crying so much and is also having all the symptoms of fever, lethargy, unconscious, or having convulsions, any other, or they're looking dull, they're just not themselves, or having high fever with the crying, inconsolable, irritable cry, or the neck is stiff, the body is stiff, those children, you have to take them to the hospital immediately. And when you get to the hospital, we, the doctors, we will see them, and then we can ask you more questions. We can examine those children, and then we can deal with the underlying cause of the crying. So crying could be due to infections. It's really infections, for example, in the brain, the meningitis. Sometimes the only symptom we're going to get in such babies is just that cry. And there are also some medical conditions that babies have an abnormal kind of cry. So we have a Cri-du-Chat's kind of syndrome. So there are other conditions that there's a way baby cries and the cry is abnormal. And when we get that kind of cry, we worry about certain conditions. It's a little bit difficult for parents to figure it out. But when it comes to us in the hospital, we can figure that out and then we can help with that. So I've been talking about crying babies, and I've talked to us about the two major categories of crying that you have. You have crying, which is just baby communicating to us of all the possible things in the world. And then you have crying, which may also be a symptom or a sign of an illness that we really need you to bring the child to the hospital. So it's your job or your role as parents to figure out which one. And like I said, the easiest way to know is that a child who is crying from all the category 1, no issues crying, they are otherwise well, there are no other symptoms. But usually for children who are crying for all the reasons, for illnesses, they tend to have all the symptoms along with the crying, so that it will really help you to know when to come to the hospital. But just say that even if you are not sure, whether it's a cry that is not something to worry about, or it's a cry that is something to worry about, it's okay to come to the hospital. It's okay to go see your pediatrician, and let's help you to figure it out. All right. So of course, it go without saying there are other things could make a child to cry, like pain, like children falling. I didn't bother to go into all that because we already know that. So a child who just had an immunization or injection, they're going to cry. And I think everybody knows why they're crying. So for the obvious reasons, I'm not decided to go into that. Or if your child suffer like any injuries or any reason for pain, maybe the child fell, hot water burns, any other reasons, most children will cry. But I think parents always know that because you can see the symptoms and you see the antecedents of the cry, and then you can always figure it out. So, but again, that also brings me to another important issue to address. Like, we should never leave our babies unsupervised, because sometimes some of us leave the babies and we don't know what happened, and we just suddenly met them crying and we are not sure. And we have had instances where babies have been dropped, maybe by a sibling, another child trying to help mommy with the baby, carrying the baby, and they drop the baby and they put the baby back. And some babies have suffered like fractures, injuries, but mothers don't know because they were not there. And I always say your baby should always have an adult supervision. So even if you're not going to be there, another competent adult, not another child, it has to be a competent adult, should be there to make sure that, the baby is fine. And remember all the things we talk about, falls and falls injuries. Remember to always make sure you don't put our babies at risk of any of those injuries, because those are the things also that could make babies to cry. And because babies are not talking. The only thing they're going to do is to cry. And sometimes, as parents, you may not be sure where the injury is or what has happened. So, if you met your baby crying, for example, and you were not sure what really happened, and the crying keeps going on for a long time, it also may be another instance where you want to bring that baby to see us at the hospital, and then we can help you work out where the injury is and all that. So it is perfectly okay. All right, now I'm going to talk about, for us as mothers, especially for the new moms and first time mothers. Sometimes this crying of the babies could really be devastating to mothers. Okay, and sometimes the mothers, have complications following delivery, things like what we call postpartum blues in the first 2 weeks, where you are just feeling tired. Sometimes you are just not yourself. You are sometimes crying, depressed, and not depression is postpartum depression usually after, if it's taking longer than 2 weeks, and some mothers already have underlying mental health issues, and they can even have what we call postpartum psychosis. So sometimes babies who cry a lot tend to also worsen these complications or postpartum conditions in mothers. And sometimes it could be quite overwhelming, and sometimes parents can have this kind of thoughts of hurting their babies, especially if they cry too much. And it's not, we've had instances where mothers tend to hurt their babies. What I'm trying to say that sometimes as mothers, you may have to be aware of that so that you take yourself away from that situation. And I always tell mothers, crying never kills any baby. All right. Yes. So if your baby is crying, not because of the illness kind of category, but just either the colic, the reflux, and all those other cries, and you've done what you could, and you feel like you are getting overwhelmed, it is perfectly okay to put your baby in the cot and take a break. All right, just leave the baby. If you have your partner around, the mother-in-law or your mom or other carers, any other competent adult that can have you, feel free to let them take the baby for a while. All right, you give yourself that 5, 10, 15 minutes break, walk out, so that you don't have to hear the cry of the baby. Give yourself some time to recover and then come back. All right, so because sometimes mothers are trying to do it all, and the frustration is so bad, and sometimes we don't want you to put yourself at risk of hurting your baby. So it is perfectly fine to put the baby in the cot, make sure they're safe, they are guarded, nothing's going to happen to them. Take a break. All right, take a break. Let your partner have the baby for a while. You can swap it over. So it is perfectly okay to do that. All right, so don't feel guilty. It's better to do that than in the process of getting overwhelmed with the situation, you put yourself at risk of hurting your baby. And if you think you're having those thoughts, or you may need to get help, because some mother, it's not like you are a bad mom. Sometimes it's just a mental health issue, and it can happen to mothers after having babies. With some mothers have what we call postpartum blues, some have postpartum depression, some have postpartum psychosis. So if you fall in any of those categories, feel free to ask for help from the medical professionals, the mental health professionals, and they can help you so that you'll be fine and your baby will be safe. So let's talk about what are some of the things you can do when your baby is crying and you're trying to just, I think it's also important for us to learn all these calming down techniques for our babies. Like I said earlier, different things for different babies. So feel free to try anyone. If it doesn't work, try the next one on your list. So sometimes the commonest one I think most of us do is to rock the babies. Just hold them in your hands and rock them. Some of us have all these rocking chairs and stuff like that, which movement sometimes helps babies to calm. I think I saw a video of a particular pediatrician also who used to put the baby on the chest of the mother, so that the babies can hear your heartbeat. Sometimes when you put your baby's ears on your chest so that they are hearing your heart beating, that rhythm, sometimes it calms some babies as well. So you may also want to try that. Sometimes just stroking the babies, either their head or their back, just patting them sometimes also can help. Also, this was in Africa, we are familiar with the swaddling babies. You can, or we call it backing them. You can put them in your back, or you can put them in the baby front, swaddle them, and sometimes that's tightness when they are tight on your bodies, and I think I remember doing that, and then you just move up and down and up and down. Sometimes it helps the babies. And please be careful if you're carrying babies. And I know, because sometimes you are really so tired, you've not really had your own rest. I saw a question of a mom whose 7 weeks old baby dropped from her hand, and I can imagine what has happened. Most likely this baby had colic, this mom is tired, and she's holding the baby, and obviously she may have drifted off in sleep, and the next thing she woke up is baby's on the floor, baby's crying and all that. So if you are tired, don't do the holding the baby in your hands. You can put the baby in their cot. Some of these cots you can rock the baby in them. Or you can put them in a rocking type. You can try that. So just swaddle them, at least tie them around your body. At least nobody's going to fall. I sometimes just sit, kneel next to my bed and just be doing that when I'm tired of standing, just rocking them back and forth. And that sometimes really help. Some babies like you to sing to them. I don't know whether some of you have tried that. So when you start to sing, you see the baby keeps quiet, and the crying just stops. So sometimes they love your voice. Sometimes they just love you to talk to them. It's really if you've been talking to your baby in the womb and they can recognize your voice. So you can also try that. Or if you can just play music. Some babies like, all those gentle lullaby kind of music, just plays for them. And sometimes that can help some babies to calm down better. Some babies, just bopping them, we've talked about, like if it is colicky kind of crying. Some babies also, some babies like for you to give them a warm bath and all that. I've talked about babies that like you to drive them around in your cars, and they have this movement. By the time you drive around your estate or your neighborhood, come back home, they slept off in the car. So some parents, that's what they do once the crying start. But one thing I just want to tell you that some things work for some people, something don't work for other people. There's no magical formula anywhere. Just keep trying each and every one of them until you find what works for you and your baby. But the good news, I can always reassure you, that as our babies get bigger and older and they start to talk, then they can actually tell us what some of the, I know some toddlers also say cry and you don't know why they are crying, or sometimes their own crying is more of a tantrum out of frustration because you didn't allow them to have their way, or you didn't give them what they want. But I think it's easier for us to know what is causing those ones. But for the babies who are still preferable, those are the ones that we tend to struggle with. It's really in the first few months, So I hope now you have all the tips on your hands. And like I said again, remember to take a break. All right, give yourself that permission to take a break. Okay, your baby is not going to die from crying. So if you can't stand it, just make sure the baby is safe. Take a break, take a walk. You will be better when you come back in 15-30 minutes. And sometimes babies themselves would have stopped crying. Hopefully somebody else will have given you that break and you will be fine. So feel free to take a break, and don't take it personally. Don't, some mothers start to feel like, oh, I'm not adequate, or I'm not good enough for my baby, maybe I'm not a good mother. No, don't you even think that at all. All right, like I said, it is okay, it is normal for the baby to cry. It has nothing to do with you, okay? It has absolutely nothing to do with what you do or what you don't do, apart from the feeding and the other stuff, which most of us, I'm sure, we don't have any issues with anyway. But baby crying, it's not because you're a bad parent, it's not because you're a bad mom. I think it's just so, I think somebody just needs to hear that today. So your baby is crying because babies cry. All right, babies cry, and this is what they do. Is normal to them. It's just like a fish in water, swimming. That is crying to babies. So, because the reason why I'm laughing, because I get a lot of questions that mothers are so worried and so upset about their babies crying, and I'm wondering why they are upset about babies doing what babies should be doing. So babies just babying, so it's okay, completely normal for babies to cry for no apparent reason. Sometimes, I know I've told you some of the reasons, but sometimes there's really no reason. They just feel like crying. And so just do your best, try and console them, but just know that after a while they will stop. All right. If they are not sick, the good news is that they will stop. But just be patient, and please give yourself permission to take a break and to take a walk and then come back. All right, I think I'm going to stop there on this topic of crying babies. I know I've had many questions in the past, but if you still have questions about your crying baby, remember that you can always post your questions directly to Ask the Pediatricians Facebook group from Mondays to Saturday. Just feel free to hit us. No question is silly, no question is stupid. We are happy to answer any question. I know sometimes some mothers try to jump on our questions and try to make it like, why are you asking that? Don't mind them. Well, we always do, so then we take them off quickly from the group. But feel free to post your questions there, and we'll try and answer them. All right. I just want to remind us that Ask the Pediatricians Foundation, in addition to what we do online, we also go offline to do community medical outreaches. And our next outreach is coming up in October. Actually, it's going to be a long outreach. Our goal is to empower our students in the secondary schools with information on first aid care. We realize that two categories of people are quite important. Our children with our parents at home, our children with the teachers in the school. So this kind of program, most of you are parents listening to me, but we also want to take this health information tips to our children in the secondary schools. We want to give them first aid care, basic training. We also want to give them like reminder tips, something they can have with them always. So somebody is having an heart attack, what do they do? Somebody is having a convulsion, what do they do? We see all sorts of things. Somebody is having a fainting attack and people start pouring water on them. There's nowhere it is written in any medical textbook, but I don't know why people do it. And people do that all the time, and we wonder, where did it start from? So we at Ask the Pediatricians Foundation, we want to start reversing that. We want to start correcting that, and we believe in catching them young. So we want to start with the students, empower the student, because then they will take that message home to their parents, and then when they also become parents, they will do the right things, and their children will learn the right things from them, and it's the cycle goes on and on. So we really believe in that. So we really appreciate you supporting us. So we're going to go to school. We're going to share over 1 million copies of our first aid tip cards to the students. We're going to give the school a version of it that they can have in the classroom so that people can make reference to it. And we also want to leave them with a first aid box. And we're looking forward to doing 5,000 schools this year. And of course, we'll keep on going until we go around all the schools in Nigeria. So if you want to support us, feel free to send us a message. Our telephone numbers are there, our WhatsApp number are there, email. You can also donate to our account. Details are for those of you who are watching on the screen. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation account, GTB. Please donate to our account, or you can go to our Global Giving page. We are verified, vetted by Global Giving, which is the largest crowdfunding platform for non-profit organization in the world. So we're there. Feel free to donate. Just $10 or £10 or 1,000 naira would donate, would give us that privilege to give 10 students those cards. Or if it's just £20, that will help us to give a first aid box, $20 or 20,000 naira. It will give a first aid box to a school. And so we know we want you to be our partner. If you're a corporate organization, partner sponsorship, we would love to welcome you to be our partners in empowering our students and school communities with the right knowledge on first aid. So feel free to reach us, and thank you so much. So I'll come again your way next week by God's grace, and we'll be talking about something different. Till then, this is me saying bye and bye for now.
Are you a mother, father, or you are involved in caring for children? If yes, then listen to Ask the Pediatricians every Thursday by 10 a.m. for insightful discussion on popular child health topics such as dangerous child health practices, immunization, infant feeding, developmental milestones, and so much more. You also get to ask questions on these topics and listen to answers to real-life child health issues by a pediatrician. Ask the Pediatricians Foundation is devoted to health education and information of parents and caregivers of children in the community to support you in raising healthy children. Don't miss Ask the Pediatricians with Dr. Gbemi because it's informative, educative, and interactive. Ask the Pediatricians Hour, the program for caring parents.